This has been the outcome of close to a year of work. The idea started in Glasgow. We had a side event on how different partners can work together for blending, what is missing on the agenda. And I know that time is very tight and we have so many partners and so many contributors who have been hand in hand with us throughout the process. And I want to thank all of them, and we'll do the thanks one by one. There's supposed to be a presentation that I'll go over very, very quickly so that those who have not been part of the guidebook get a gist of what is it that we've done together. And then I will ask President Adesina to give a keynote, followed by Prime Minister Blair, and then we will go over with the different partners. And then we have with us Professor Stern. I hope he can, and they just issued a very important export report. And there's always complementarity that comes from one report to another. So it'd be fantastic if you can also give us some insights into that. Without further ado, the objective of what we were doing is how can we increase quantity and quality of climate investment, translate commitments into implementable projects, and this is a COP of implementation. A core question that inspired a series of discussions on the importance of bridging the climate finance gap and mobilizing resources to countries most in need. So over a year, there was a consultative and inclusive process with more than 100 different stakeholders representing governments, development partners, multilateral development banks, commercial banks, private sector, philanthropy, think tanks, and civil society to underpin a climate agenda rooted in the principles of justice and equality. I'm very happy that we're celebrating today another milestone for us, which is the launch of the Sharm El-Sheikh Guidebook for Just Financing. It's an embodiment of multi-stakeholder engagement, one of the key aspects of our work in international cooperation. This guidebook emphasizes the need to scale up investments towards climate adaptation and mitigation projects, highlighting the importance of improved access of quality and quantity of climate finance that leaves no one behind. Guiding principles for just financing, and there's a up in a little bit that has these guiding principles, but they are cored around three themes: country ownership, equitable pathways to climate finance, and governance structures. These principles serve as a framework to guide stakeholders to adapt innovative climate finance modalities, instruments that can unlock needed scale financing for both public and private capital providers. This is the QR code of Just Financing. And the guide also contributes to filling the information gap for both national governments, investors, to reduce the risk and uncertainty. It also identifies key barriers to private investment and proposes solutions to overcome them, including through innovative financing models. And here we have details on blended finance, carbon credits, and resilience credits. More importantly, the guidebook addresses the limited access of developing countries to climate funds and thus provides a mapping of capital providers based on their access criteria, the risk appetite, regional and sectoral focus, the ticket size, and financing instruments. So this is another important contribution from the guidebook. It also presents a set of that provide insights into the different ways that public and private sources of capital can engage in efficient structures for good outcomes. These case studies span across different geographic regions, country income levels, and this is another important contribution. They actively address climate-related challenges and propose solutions in both adaptation and mitigation. And we keep on emphasizing how blended and unblended instruments and approaches can be replicated in other countries, particularly on the adaptation side. The guidebook concludes with key just financing outcomes and maximize the effectiveness and efficiency of existing climate finance systems in the short run, while rethinking international architecture in the medium and long run. And there's a QR code that also has information on the actionable agenda going forward. As I conclude my remarks, I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to all the partners who spared no effort in providing valuable insights and feedback to bring to life this unique guidebook. These are several logos, and behind these logos are teams that work together for implementation. We have laid the foundations and created a dynamic and living document. This is not the end. There's always going to be, within the next 12 months, more that we will learn. And this will be updated to account for global changes and incorporate more implementable projects in other regions. Time is quite tight, so we are going to be as fast as possible so that we can benefit from everyone's presence. There are going to be cards that have QR codes for the whole guidebook, but this is what it looks like. And we will be sending everybody copies as well once we finish from Sharm El-Sheikh. Now let me introduce President Adesina. African Development Bank has been a partner with Egypt over the past year on many topics. You have been talking about adaptation. Yesterday we attended adaptation acceleration program that the African Development Bank is doing with the Global Adaptation Center. So please, your comment.
Thank you very much, Minister Rania. Let me congratulate you and your team for incredible work that you've done in putting together this Sharm El-Sheikh Guidebook. It's not a lot of, it's a difficult work to do, but congratulations. And we at the African Development Bank applaud you and applaud this guidebook. Why do we do it? Because we are talking about just financing. Well, what the world needs for developing countries, they don't need sympathy. They just simply need financing to be able to tackle the gargantuan challenges that they have in terms of adapting to climate change. So I'll speak just quickly in the case of Africa. You know, just to adapt to climate change, Africa will need roughly about $125 billion a year by 2030. If you look at how much Africa actually gets today, it gets $18 billion total in terms of climate financing, and only $11 billion in terms of adaptation financing. So you're looking at a climate financing gap for adaptation of $114 billion that you're talking about. Issue is what's been done about it. And we at African Development Bank, we prioritize two major actions. We were just talking about that. One is a program called African Adaptation Acceleration Program to mobilize $25 billion for climate adaptation for Africa. It's the largest effort in Africa and the largest globally on adaptation, quite frankly. And we're working on that with the Global Center on Adaptation. The second one is we are in the replenishment process of the African Development Fund, which is the constitutional arm of the African Development Bank. Well, when we talk about adaptation financing, we shouldn't really be asking poor countries to take more loans to adapt to climate change, a problem they didn't cause. Even for the entire FDB system, 95% of everything we are doing is really on loans, right? Only 5% of it is on concessional financing. So what we need to do is actually provide more grants to countries, and that's why the replenishment of the African Development Bank ADF 16 replenishment is critical, because that will raise up to $13 billion for these low-income countries to be able to adapt to climate change. Now, but as we do that, we also know that the private sector must play a very important role. And in playing that role, we have to de-risk a lot of the efforts in private sector. I take a look at Africa. We have $2.1 trillion of assets under management. But if we are able just to get 10% of that to go into climate resilient infrastructure, green infrastructure, will solve all the problems in regard to upgrading our infrastructure space. The other thing is green financing. Today, Africa accounts for just $2 billion out of the $623 billion annually in global finance in terms of green bonds. So what we need to do is be smart in leveraging a lot of the green bonds to finance most of the things that we are talking about. And just to close, I want to say that at the end of the day, if we're talking about just financing, then there has to be trust to be built. As long as the developed countries do not pay up the $100 billion that they say they will pay for developing countries, it just seems to be a lot of megawatts of talk and very little delivery on that. And we must make sure that that actually gets done. That's how you build trust. If you do that, then the developed countries will say, okay, yeah, we got what it takes to be able to adapt. So I think just transition requires that whatever is promised is also delivered. Congratulations on the work. It shows what needs to be done. But what we now need is action to deliver on what's been promised. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President Adesina. Now I go to Prime Minister Blair, and we met in Singapore last November. We were just discussing at the time from Glasgow to Sharm El-Sheikh, and you have the Tony Blair Center for which focuses on African countries, and you helped us tremendously in looking into the ideas from non-state actors when it comes to just financing.
So, 3 points to make. First of all, Dr. Rana, congratulations to you and all your team. Those of us who put on Summit know how tough it is, and I think you've done an excellent job, and thank you so much for your leadership. And we have been delighted to be part of it. The first point I wanted to make is that the actual process of putting this guidebook together has been important. There's been something like 40 non-state actors involved in it. There's been a lot of wide consultation. I love when I'm going around, I'm seeing these phrases like implementation and solutions. But that's often what's been missed from this debate. So the process has been a very collaborative one, and it's been very focused on the types of things that President Adesina has just been talking about. So the second thing is, this guidebook's worth studying. A lot of what comes out of conferences, if you're in government, I say, another conference, but this is an actual guidebook with practical information and advice, whether you're a government, where you've got to make changes in order to be able to absorb whatever help could come to you, whether you're someone in the private sector who looks to play your part in financing these projects, with one of the international financial institutions, and you're looking as to how you use your capital most, and also, I just continue. Okay. You can guess the rest. Okay. But the important thing about this guidebook is that it should be studied, and as Ronnie, as you said, should be built on in the next year. So the second point is, this is practical. This is about real solutions that people can deliver, whether they're in the private sector or indeed government, or working on the recording studio side. So the third point, however, is just to say a special word of congratulations on the WEFI itself. So it's one thing is to write the book, it's another thing actually to do it. The WEFI is an attempt to do it. It links together the energy, the water, the food. It's very important to see all of them as one seamless part of the challenge that we face. So the final thing I wanted to say is congratulations on WEFI. You've made announcements already, you're going to make some more, but more important, there's action happening. And my reflection is that what we actually want now is not strong words and weak actions. We want strong actions, and you've shown the way it can be done. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Let me go now to Amrio Theol, Vice President of the European Investment Bank, and they had the role this year of leading MDBs, particularly with EBRD on the climate action. Theol, we had so many discussions on the guidebook over the past months. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. And start by telling you I'm really impressed by what has been achieved. I'm really impressed by your dedication to this. You have always been pushing us. We had some doubts about where we would go, and I think at the end it comes to something that is really a reference book that is going to be very helpful, and that is, as Prime Minister Blair said, very concrete. So that's I think why we very much welcome the guidebook. In terms of MDBs, and indeed EIB this year chaired the group of multilateral development banks. What I would say is we are doing two kinds of things. One is still volumes of financing, and we have published a few weeks ago the climate finance report that shows the amount of financing that we do for development and what for development in climate finance. And what it shows is that the figures are really increasing. We were at a total of a bit more than 60 billion euros for low and middle income countries, coming from much lower figure. And actually for a good part it was adaptation, majority of it for adaptation. And altogether, if you include the high income countries, it is 82 billion euros in 2021 for all the NDBs. So these are figures that are not only big, but they are also increasing. It's not enough, but we are, I would say, on the right track. And the second thing that we do, because NDB support goes well beyond financing, is that we are supporting policy reforms and improvement to regulatory frameworks. We are trying to work to enhance project quality and sustainability, and we are also unlocking available finance and financial barriers that needs to be relieved, especially through the risk sharing instruments, these kind of things. Now, what we also work on is coordination, and actually coordination not only among ourselves, but also coordination to use more innovative, more collaborative financial structures. The Just Energy Transition Partnerships is one example of that. But also, actually, the Prime Minister said, indeed, what happened yesterday was very impressive in terms of collaboration with the private sector, with the philanthropy, with all the MPs, and I think this is the proof that things are moving in terms of mobilization. So congratulations, and now we have to deliver.
Axel, the World Bank and Egypt yesterday, we launched together our country climate development report, the CCTRs, and the World Bank has played a very important role with us on the guidebook as well. Axel, please.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to the guidebook. I think it's totally where I said it is a book worthwhile reading, but most important is there is a need for a concrete follow-up, and ultimately, when it's about financing, we need to come up with financing now and not somewhere in the distant future. I think we have been scaling up massively our climate financing. Last year was 32 billion, but if I look at Africa, we are providing for the whole African continent about $34 billion. My expectation is to 2030, we will put another $250 billion into Africa, of which probably up to $100 billion climate financing, and half will have to be adaptation. We're already at the 50-50 level distribution that will need to be maintained and expanded. I think one of the big challenges is to have many more actors in there, because in Africa it's not only the climate change, but also that we are facilitating the energy access. Only 40% have access to energy. So I think we need to see how we can mobilize much more aggressively the private sector in this regard, and then make a difference.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for being just with your time. Emmanuel, IFC, private sector engagements. When you talk about blended finance, it's trying to draw in more private sector for the climate solutions. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Rania. I'd also like to join the others in congratulating you on this guidebook, and also thanking you for your leadership in bringing it to bear. So at the International Finance Corporation, we know that mobilizing private capital is necessary to invest at the scale required to address climate change in Africa. And private capital can only be deployed into investable projects. This requires deep dive analysis on how to make climate projects in Africa attractive to private investors. As mentioned in Chapter 6 of the guidebook, which I did read, there is a need to establish a framework to advance climate financing on the African continent. And we can do this through blended finance vehicles. Blended finance can mobilize private capital into impactful investment opportunities for projects with a commercial revenue model for a below-market risk-return profile. Blended finance is used to lower the risk of an investment and to reduce coordination and transaction costs. IFC will continue to play a leading role in developing and upholding high standards as an implementing entity of blended finance resources. IFC and other DFIs have developed enhanced principles for blended concessional finance, which provide important guidelines to manage the use of concessional funds for high impact. The role of IFC and other NDVs is key to continuing helping governments across the continent with policy amendments and reforms that can drive climate investments, as well as providing technical assistance to both government and the private sector on how best to tackle and navigate climate issues, new markets, and that can ensure profitability of private investments, as well as positive impacts for the continent. So with that, thank you again, Mr. Rani.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, Dr. Khanda, the UNDP helped tremendously within the guidebook to take a look at the enabling environment, particularly at the national level. And you know that UNDP is doing a lot to help countries formulate their NDCs. Please.
Thank you very much, and let me start by congratulating you for this financing book. It's a very milestone and already a successful outcome of this COP. So congratulations for your vision and leadership. When we talk about UNDP, it's true I cannot compete with the financing institutions sitting here, but we cover 140 countries that we are supporting on NDCs, and our investment portfolio, if we can call it like that, is about 3 billion only on climate change. So we are not sizable, but we are respectable. So this is one point I wanted to say. On the guidebook, I think it's a major breakthrough, because we have heard about the need to have more access to financing, yes, but we also have heard that the financing is there. So there is a gap there, and from my point of view, also being pragmatic, I think this guidebook will help us to jump and to fill the gap between the needs and the existing resources, to match between supply and demand. I think this is a very important point. We in UNDP, and we had the pleasure today to launch a new facility with the president of the Islamic Development Bank, and we have been discussing with the IB, etc., other partners with the World Bank. We are building leading a new initiative which is called the Green Arab State Facility for Transition, exactly for this purpose, and we want to have translation of the NDCs into implementation and into investment plan. One of the business lines that we want to open is to help countries to develop bankable and investable projects. So with that, I'm sure that it will be a success, and we can talk about it next year at COP28. I'm sure you will have already beared a lot of fruits, and congratulations for everything you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Before I conclude the first segment with Jay, I would like to invite Mr. James Jan, and Anektat was very keen to be part of the guidebook, particularly on the international investment agreements, because this also defines how countries, when they come to projects, the climate comes into the different agreements. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. UNCTAD is very much proud to be partner with your ministry and your leadership to contribute to the guidebook. Congratulations for having this wonderful guidebook. It's not only for financing, but also for investing. I'm talking about upstream and also downstream of the investment chain. In a sense, it's a guidebook. It's very timely, as we see that investment policy making is at a crossroad. Just to give you an example of international investment regime, there's no multilateral investment system like WTO for trade, but this international investment regime consists of 3,400 investment treaties concluded at bilateral, regional, sub-regional, and sectoral levels. And out of this 3,400, 2,900 treaties were concluded before 2010. And if you do a search, as we have the database, all these treaties hardly mention the word sustainable development, not to mention climate change. So, and there's also investor-state dispute mechanisms that will prevent or constrain governments to update their regulations regarding to climate change emissions. So at the national level, we have done a survey, as over 50% of the countries do not have the investment strategies in climate change built in the climate strategies. So there's a need for double embedding the investment strategies into climate change strategy and vice versa. So there's a daunting task, and the guidebook provides the concrete guidance for us as international organizations helping countries modernize their national laws and regulations and reform international investment regimes. So it is timely and it's important to do that. That's very helpful. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I wish also to take the opportunity, Minister, to congratulate you for the number of agreements that you've concluded with international institutions to support Egypt country platform for water, food, and energy and access. That's a great achievement, a very concrete achievement we have observed, and we are committed to help with the follow-up and implementation through technical assistance with your country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me end the first contributors with Jay Collins. Jay Collins has been instrumental. Citibank represents the private sector in this guidebook. We wanted governments, think tanks, private sector. In the next segment, we'll hear from the philanthropies that were also part of the guidebook. Jay, go ahead.
Thank you, Minister. First, everyone's blended together here, NWEFI and the guidebook. Let me start by saying NWEFI represents a message to the G77 that ambition counts. Egypt wasn't part of the country program of the G7 and JET-P. They simply showed ambition and the money came. So ambition begets funding. Second, it's projects. NWEFI is project-based. It starts with projects that then can assist to move them forward, mobilization money, and then crowd the private sector into them. Third is this entire process requires mobilization, and the way to mobilize by project is to have a conductor. And Minister Rania and the government of Egypt have shown the world that actually, if you ask IFID to play one role, and EIB another, and EBRD another, and IFC another, across the board, within the cones of NWEFI, within individual projects, we had extraordinary speed. Why? Because if you don't have a conductor, you have an orchestra that's a cacophony and chaos. Instead, there was discipline around the projects, missions of the official community, and then a crowding into the private sector. So that's why we had speed. Capacity. Minister Rania and I sat in a room, over a year ago, and we talked about the fact that everybody's been talking about blended finance since Addis Ababa at a 50,000 foot level, and it's not working. And I said, but to really get into the trenches, you talk at it as a banker at 1,000 feet, and it's very hard to understand. Minister Rania said, no, we're going to do this at 5,000 feet. This book is a technical guidebook at that level, the best in the world, for official leaders in the community. I heard key points of it with the UNFCCC negotiators yesterday for a few hours as they look at the next collective quantified goal. That methodology and that process, well, there's a lot in here to learn from that. So again, this is capacity building. It's the role that the COP presidency aspired to in the emerging markets, and we just have to thank you, Minister Rania, for yours and your team's extraordinary effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, this concludes this section, so I will just ask all our honorable guests to leave the stage and call on the next speakers. Thank you. Okay. Several experts also on the guidebook, and we have with us Deputy Managing Director of the IMF, Mr. Bouli, and the IMF is playing an important role in also innovative finance when it comes to the RST and using SDRs. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I also want to congratulations to from that. Also working very hard on how to help us in this fight against change, and in particular climate financing. Sorry, maybe I can change to a different. Yeah, thank you. We just launched our new long-term facility, RST. It's a 20-year long-term loan with a 10.5-year grace period. It's the first long-term instrument in the history of IMF. And we created this instrument in order to support our members to deal with this long-term challenge of climate change. The demand has been very strong. We have signed 4 staff-level agreements. The latest one is Bangladesh, we announced today. And in addition to Rwanda, Costa Rica, and Barbados. So we have signed 4 agreements so far. And we have got pledge from 60 members in terms of contribution. So right now we have a pledge of total $40 million. And there will be more coming. Our goal eventually will be $100 million for recycling the SDRs that distributed last year. More importantly, we want our facility to play a catalytic role to leverage our program to attract more public and private capital to support our members. So we do this in several ways. One thing we do is, in addition to give the money to our members, we want to support our members to implement policy reform so that they can attract more public and private capital in climate finance. For example, we support our members to develop their public financial management system so that they can have enabling environment for public and private capital to come in. For another example, we can support our members to develop a legal framework to issue green bonds. These are just the kind of reforms that we can support. In addition, we work on our members when we create our program to put, including our conditionality, to design ways, both national and regional ways, to crowd in private capital with our money. And we're going to work with our members and also MDBs and private investors to create innovative vehicles to crowd in private capital. I stop here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next, Dr. Carney, you've been with us in this journey for some time. You represent a lot of private sector, a lot of private money. And in the guidebook, we're trying to show how different capital providers can be part of this and what governments need to do and what are the ticket sizes.
Well, thank you. It was very formal now, Dr. Al-Rashad. Your Excellency, Minister, I thought we were friends, but yes. And we become friends because of the amount of effort that's gone into this. And let me just make a couple of very quick points, which, first off, the group that I'm up here representing, Jay Combs, others very much living active members of this, GFANs, what are we doing? We're trying to, what we are doing is we're building commitments, tools and markets in order to help the world get to net zero, to help the financing for net zero. And there's an active aspect there. So the commitments continue to build, the tools are being refined, new markets are being created. And the second point is that what we recognize in a situation like this, and you have at the heart of the guidebook and the living example of NUEFE, is the need for an integrated approach. First and foremost, within country. Obviously, it has to be led by the country, fundamental, and I thought it was explained well. You didn't wait for the G7. Don't wait for the G7. That's a good piece of advice. It's good if they show up with money and being constructive, but don't wait for the G7. Because private capital is not going to wait for the G7. There's a number of multilateral organizations, including on the stage you just heard from, who aren't waiting for instruction, but are getting strategies and moving on. So driven by the country, but an integrated approach that gives life to the phrase just transition. Let me make a point in general as some of these markets are developed, and I'm going to come back to integration in a second, which is that when we think about additionality, think about things that would happen. Like I can look at a solar project in Egypt with a spreadsheet and say, this is going to give me a commercial return, and therefore there's no additionality there. That's wrong. That when you know it, but I'm going to say for those who may be a little less familiar, that's not going to happen in the next decade unless there's changes to gas, unless you have the other component of it, unless there's elements of just transition, unless there's broader enabling environment reforms. It's all linked and therefore additional. It needs to be seen as the whole. That's relevant, by the way, when we think about how we develop carbon markets, carbon credit markets. Additionality can be a key component in its approach we need to take more broadly. So integrated, I could go on about it, I won't within country, but that's one example. The second thing, and you see it here and in the comments, integrated across all sources of capital. And the blending of finance, comparative advantage of different forms of capital. Let me make two last points. This, as it was said, 5,000 feet, I like that analogy. It's a practitioner's guide. It's a practitioner's guide. Now, I'm going to make a suggestion in that respect. I don't want to add to work, but I want to add to impact. Is as this guide is implemented, let's populate those QR codes with some case studies which show how to do it and give life so that others can learn. Because I go back to the purpose of GFAN, but the purpose of what you're doing, which is building, creating, developing, extending, creating a better market. Last thing I'll say, which is just a lesson I think for everyone here, there's an expression that fortune favors the bold. Well, finance favors the ambitious in terms of addressing climate change. What you've taken on here with the guide is ambitious. It's great. We get the result. It's going to have a huge impact. And of course, the living application with UFA is exactly that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark. Dr. Turner. Next, Remy, there's 500 public development banks with financing commons, another important contributor to finance. Go ahead.
Thanks a lot, Minister. And let me first thank you for the invitation. Everybody measures how concrete, NOAFI, the case studies, and thoughtful you are. Providing yesterday and today these two pieces that helps the discussion for the whole COP and especially for this Finance Day, which I feel extremely promising, and thanks also for the inclusiveness in the preparation of this guidebook. Actually, I had exactly the same points as Mark. So the first one is to stress the importance of country ownership, as the guidebook is making it extremely clear. We see, of course, the question of sovereignty louder and louder. We know that we have to combine sovereignties with multilateralism that is at risk, including the G7 maybe. And for that, we need to embark as many institutions as possible. So yes, this is the idea from day one of this Finance in Common initiative. There are 520 public development banks in the world, so all over the place. You can look at the fantastic database that is online, refreshed year after year, not to promote public banks, but really for you to challenge this group and to make the best use of it. We gathered in Abidjan 2 weeks before COP27. EIB, Ambroise was there, and the African Development Bank, I think Akin was there as well, hosted. So MDBs are considering their fellow institutions. And I think it's important both on the supply side to innovate, but also on the demand side, because we have to originate way more projects than we are doing today. And my second comment is on this integrated approach. It's also clearly stated in Nick and Vera's report that was launched yesterday. I see Amar also in the room. So this invitation to see all of us as a system, and maybe from our discussion have a new framework emerge. I'm very short, but I feel if we want to move forward in this COP, we have to more clearly distinguish what nobody will ever finance. So we need a pot of financing for solidarity, for adaptation, for loss and damage, to create trust enough in the negotiation to open the other discussion. How much are we going to allocate of concessional resources to mobilize private finance? And we need, as public banks, that guidance way more clearly than we have today in order to do billions for solidarity and to do trillions for SDGs and for mitigation. And we have a unique occasion now that GFANS exists, NGFS for central bankers and regulators, and finance in common, to have the three components of a financial system, to have a dialogue at a more strategic level, and then of course come back to case studies. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Remy. You mentioned the supply is there, and there's demand from the countries, and the guidebook is trying to find out why there's this supply and demand are not matching, and that's where Mark comes in, because EBRD helps bring the supply and the demand together through projects. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bonnier. I'll be very brief.
You need to be closer.
I'm going to be very brief because I'm going to echo what others have said, but we all understand the scale of the challenge and the need to move beyond the kind of high-level conceptual conversations to real practical implementation. The guidebook, and congratulations on the guidebook, is a really practical contribution to that debate, setting out all the kind of key elements. And just like others, in terms of the challenge of matching the supply and the demand, the challenge of delivering the transformation at the scale that we need, it requires a comprehensive country-led approach. All the different elements need to fall in place, and that's the combination of the political ambition, the policy framework, the technical assistance, the project preparation, and of course the financing, which is the combination of grant financing where it's needed, MDB financing, private financing. All of those elements need to be in place for us to deliver the transformation that is needed. And as others have said, I mean, the guidebook is a great contribution. The NOEFI program and the energy pillar in particular is a fantastic example of this. At the EBRD, we've been very proud to be involved and to help out with the energy pillar, and it will demonstrate this. It will bring great benefits and opportunities to Egypt, but also we hope will be a very practical example that other countries follow.
Thank you very much, Mark, for your partnership. Next, Hiroshi Miga provides guarantees for private sector engagement in different projects, including climate. So, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Minister. First of all, congratulations in this event. As you kindly mentioned, MIGA has a unique role within the World Bank Group. It provides guarantees, and it means that we need partners to do our business. So we need partners like EBRD, we need partners like IFC, we need private sector partners like Citi. We only can function with partners. Also, what we want to do is really to do a programmatic approach, not a one-off deal, but do a lot of similar projects, so that we can make a best effort of what we're doing. So in that sense, this guidebook is actually very helpful in having all these various parties come together, having the same kind of way of thinking, and that really saves us a lot of time. I just want, using this guidebook, what we foresee is that we'll be able to bring more private sector money into the emerging markets and I think that's the aim of our whole exercise. But anyway, congratulations again for this magnificent achievement.
Thank you very much, Rush. This morning there was a session talking about the missing P, and that was philanthropy. I said it should be the prominent P. So Rockefeller Foundation, please Elizabeth, go ahead and tell us about philanthropy, because a very important contributor and agent of change in the climate finance world.
And thank you so much, and thank you for changing us from missing to mighty, or I think other. We'll find the right adjective, but thank you so much for having us here.
And prominent. I love
prominent. Okay,
P is one of my favorite letters. So prominent.
Excellent. We'll take it. Well, thank you so much, and I just also wanted to congratulate you personally on this COP and focused on implementation, because I think just on a personal level, seeing the enthusiasm and seeing also just the number of people actually implementing solutions is what I think we all obviously need to try in order to keep global warming to below 3 degrees and really at 1.5. You know, one of the things that we've been working on for a long time, the foundation's been around for almost 110 years, and one of the things that we did very early on is really help invent. We tried to push the frontiers forward, and one of the things that we've really focused on is impact investing, and really looking at how we tie impact to returns. And so to me, the opportunity here is to continue to do the work that we do, to grant make and support capacity building in communities and against ideas, but also to continue to use our concessional capital across this entire panel, and perhaps that way as well, to really help support and scale the critical ideas that we need as a planet to combat the changes that we are seeing in climate. And so I am very excited for this guidebook because it helps articulate those opportunities. One of the things we also shared yesterday was a report that we published in partnership with the Boston Consulting Group, which showed that only 16% of flows to climate finance are actually happening. And we need to change that paradigm, and we're very eager and supportive to work with you and other partners to use our capital to help make that happen. So thank you for putting this together. Thank you for helping make sure that people are at the center of this and making sure that it's about just financing. And we look forward to partnering with you and others to make this happen.
Thank you very much. Another important message is integrated philanthropy as well, because and there's a lot of discussion on that happening. So that's another very good addition. Demilola, you are one of the loudest and most enthusiastic voices when it comes to energy and Sea for All, and you were with us in the guidebook as well. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Minister. First, I wanted to just recognize the tremendous work. You were with us in New York, actually taking guidance from African ministers, which I don't think has been mentioned here. So what this just financing guidebook really brings is a level of trust as well. And for someone from the continent and working with people in the continent, that, oh, if Egypt can do it, we could possibly do it. And I think that's very, very important when a lot of areas that we have in global diplomacy, that trust has been lost. I think another critical thing that is very important is the role of energy poverty, and understanding for many of our countries we need more energy, not less, but we have the unique opportunity to make it clean. I was at a Bloomberg session yesterday, and they said last year, 0.6% of renewable investments went into Africa. So when we talk about the just part of financing, we really, really need to think about that figure. And I think this guidebook helps us to give us a template. I really like Mark's idea of case studies to at least encourage, almost like how-to guides, what went well, but more importantly, what went bad, so we can learn from that. I think that's where we don't like sharing. What is the lessons learned? How long did things really take? How long did it take to get a response back about that agreement? And we really need to put that together to help improve the process. So again, congratulations again, and really look forward to working on those case studies with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Just in terms of the case studies, the guidebook has 48 case studies on successful examples, but we do want to add more in terms of how we can move forward. And also, we might have a guidebook on the WAFI by next COP. Let me go next to Joe from OECD. OECD is an institution that has the task of always accounting the 100 billion and trying to help us make sense of all of this. Go ahead.
Thank you, Minister, and congratulations on what is a fantastic initiative with this guidebook and for hosting this event tonight. We really appreciated the collaboration from you and from your team in particular in the contribution the OECD made to it. So we were honoured to be asked to contribute the governance chapter to this guidebook, and in taking on the challenge, we aim to bring together the vital lessons that we've learned about governance in other aspects of our work, taking that from development effectiveness through to corporate governance. It also builds on the commitments contained in the 2021 OECD DAC Declaration on aligning development assistance with the Paris Agreement. 3 key recommendations emerged from this work. First, the importance of donors providing transparent and consistent flows of public climate finance in line with good practices of aid effectiveness. So we're talking about climate finance effectiveness, consistent with that. Second, the value of developing country-owned climate action plans, as many other speakers have already said, to maximise flows and the effectiveness of international climate finance, including NDCs, national adaptation plans, and sectoral decarbonisation pathways. And third, the establishment of country platforms, providing a useful mechanism for enhancing coordination amongst beneficiary governments, development partners, and the private sector, who all, as we've heard, need to come together. So thank you. Again, the OECD looks forward to working with partners to continue to maximise the flows and effectiveness of climate finance.
Thank you very much to OECD. Joy from EFAT has a comment, and of course adaptation figures in very strongly, so there's also a resilience initiative that is taking place on the 14th. Please go ahead, Joy.
Thank you so much, Minister. Such a pleasure and such a privilege for EFAT to be here and for to be part of this panel. So the key thing, and we were really privileged to be also contributors to the Just Financing Guidebook, and thank you very much for your leadership of this. One of the key things that we are positioning the guidebook to do is to put out some innovative ideas. And resilience and adaptation, as you all know, has been one area where the private sector has done abysmally little. In fact, the latest numbers on this are that 1.6% of the overall new and additional climate financing coming from the private sector is towards adaptation. So it's clearly an area that we need to do something about. With resilience credits, what we are doing is we are marrying 3 key ideas. One, the need for impact. So we've got to measure extremely well, and we are bringing the technology that we built within EFAT to bear upon that in terms of measurement. Second, we are bringing finance. EFAT has assembled and has huge experience with assembling finance and bringing in the private sector at the non-sovereign as well as at the sovereign level. And third is the just part. EFAT is also a UN organization, and we focus on redistributing those benefits after the asset class is created, the returns from that to the marginalized and the poor. Thank you so much, Minister.
Thank you very much, Joy. And EFAT is our key partner in the food pillar in WAFI. So this is also fantastic. Before we conclude, can Professor Nick, Lord Stern, we cannot be talking about finance, and you are here. You have been over the years doing the articulation, telling us what needs to be done. Last year in Glasgow, there was a report. This year from Sharm El-Sheikh, there's another one where you're digging deeper into what the continent is looking at, and also all of the topics that we've been talking about. Please.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. I am indeed Nick, so thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this great endeavour and your initiative in making it happen. What Vera Sonway and I tried to do at the request of the 2 POP presidents was to look at the necessary scale of finance and crucially the composition of that finance, its complementarity with different parts, to deliver on Paris. So the scale necessary for all the things we've been talking about for us is defined by delivery on Paris. So what is necessary for that around climate finance? Well, you have to start with the investment, because finance is for investment. So we started by looking at the investments in the energy transition, in adaptation and resilience, in loss and damage, and the natural capital. And we looked at flows into emerging markets and developing economies. We put China to one side, not because it's unimportant, it doesn't need external finance. From that, we asked how much might be available internally, because investment in most countries is in large measure financed internally. For some countries better positioned than others, of course. And we came to the conclusion that for delivery on Paris, you needed about 1 trillion external flows by 2030 per annum. So that is the answer to the question. There's lots of detail. Go to the LSE website. You can find it all. But then we said, well, where could that come from? Majority in private sector, provided somebody is there to participate, not always, but in a lot of cases, in reducing, managing, sharing the risk. That party would be in large measure be the multilateral development banks and development finance institutions. So we argued by looking at those numbers, the scale of private finance necessary, you need to triple the financing ability of the MDBs in the next 5 years. That is perfectly possible. It costs very little. Part of it comes from my great friend Franny on my right. He had done the capital adequacy framework. Some of it will come from that. Some of it must come from extra paid-in capital. Sums involved are absolutely trivial in relation to what it can do. And then you need this collection, which people have mentioned, of low-cost or grant finance. Bilateral support, SDRs, voluntary carbon markets. We look at the scale, look at the composition, recognize that people have emphasized the natural capital and some parts of adaptation, private flows. There'll be some, but they won't be to the same extent as there would be the generation, new generation in renewables. So that's the story. So it's in a sense trying to say, can we understand the scale of the supply side necessary here? Yes, we can, to coin a phrase, and what's involved in the different players. This is perfectly possible, but as everything has come on this platform, you have to proceed on all these fronts at the same time. And we can do that. It's very good to see the people here in this room, in this conference, who are doing exactly that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One very important aspect in in the new paper is debt sustainability. There's a very good section on debt, and this is very timely given what we're seeing with the global backdrop and emerging markets.
Recognize the tremendous contribution to Amar Bhattacharya in doing all this.
Thank you very much. Well, this concludes the launch. I don't think we did justice to everything in the guidebook. I think we have 12 months to go chapter by chapter and have workshops and have discussions and create the case studies that Mark mentioned. But I think the energy in Sharm El-Sheikh is high energy. We're all powered. It's solar, and so it's renewable and it's clean. And yesterday with Egypt's country platform for NOAFI, we wanted to show a practical example of implementation. Today with the guidebook as well. I want to thank all the contributors to the guidebook, all the experts, everyone who has been with us in this journey. A very long process, but consultative process, but very, very inclusive. Thank you very much, and together for implementation.